Welcome to this meeting of the Board of Education of Anne Arundel County. This meeting is being televised live on AACPS TV and streamed on AACPS's YouTube channel. General information and protocols for the meeting are posted on the sign by the doorway as you enter the room, so please make sure you read those if you have not already done so. At this time, we'll have our invocation. O God, we pray to administer that which is just in all educational policies, being ever mindful of your guidance, stir us to action with love, wisdom, and understanding. At this time, we'll have our Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now, item 2.03, approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve the agenda is written.
Second.
Do we have consensus? We do have consensus. Okay, item 2.04, establish the agenda order. Do we have a motion?
Motion to establish the agenda is printed.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We have consensus. And we do. So we're going to be moving on to item 3.0 public hearing. Welcome to the public hearing on the superintendent's recommended fiscal year 2026 CIP and capital budget. There were no individuals signed up in advance, so we will have no public comment tonight. This hearing is designed so that board members can obtain public input on the budget, as opposed to a back and forth discussion. Board members will take what they have heard from the public up to tonight and formulate their thoughts and questions about the budget when it is voted on later this evening. Thank you for attending this evening to provide input on the superintendent's recommended fiscal year 2026 CIP and capital budget. Okay, we're moving on to item 4.0, public comments on agenda items, and we do not have any public comments this evening, so we'll move on to our reports. Item 5.01, our CRASC report.
Good evening, President Silkworth, Vice President Frank, Dr. Bedell, and members of the board. My name is Jason Semenoff Jr., and I'm a proud freshman at Chesapeake High School. My pronouns are he, him, and I am so humbled to be serving as the CRASC Secretary of Education. CRASC hosted its first virtual town hall of the school year on September 4th. Key topics included the new AACPS cell phone guidelines and their impact on students, concerns about student driving on campus, Chromebook access in the classrooms, and changes to the grading regulation. CRASC would welcome an opportunity to provide student feedback on the cell phone guidelines and explore potential adjustments. On September 11th, CRASC hosted our second executive team meeting. Members received parliamentary procedure training from our amazing parliamentarians, Jack Warwick and David Herrera. Additionally, we collaborated within our departments to set goals for the upcoming school year, including possible revisions to the CRASC Constitution and bylaws. The CRASC Constitution Revisions Committee, or CRC, has begun drafting amendments to include 3 new executive team positions and consider changes to the SMOB nomination process. The next CRC meeting is scheduled for Monday, September 23rd at 7 p.m. via the CRASC Google Meet. All students are welcome to attend. The deadline to set up for MASC Workshop Presenter Certification training is tonight at 11:59 p.m. MASC members must obtain this certification to present at upcoming fall or winter conferences, as well as the spring convention. The event will take place on Saturday, September 21st, at Western High School located in Baltimore City. MASC is hosting a student member of the board informational webinar on October 10th at 7 p.m. High school sophomores and juniors interested in applying for the Maryland State Student Member of the Board can find the application on CRASC's Brightspace and the AACPS Leadership/CRASC webpage. We are excited to once again partner with the Board of Elections, the League of Women Voters, and Anne Arundel County NAACP to host voter registration drives from September 17th through October 8th. Students 16 and older are eligible to register to vote. Dates and times for each drive are available on the Student Leadership or CRASC webpage under the Student Voter Registration section. Students can also volunteer at these registration drives and earn service hours through training provided by the Board of Elections. The sign-up link can be found on this page too. Attention seniors! The Maryland General Assembly Page Program is offering students a chance to experience the legislative process by serving for 2 weeks during the 13-week legislative session from January 8th to April 7th. For information, students can contact their social studies teachers or visit the CRASC webpage. Applications are due by Monday, September 30th at 8 p.m. Lastly, the United States Senate Youth Program, or USSYP, offers students with an interest in public service a chance to engage in policy discussions with senators, cabinet members, and officials from the Department of State and Defense. 2 students from each state, the District of Columbia, and the Department of Defense Education Activity will be selected. The nomination process, requirements, and applications can be found on the CRASC webpage, with submissions due by October 9th. There are plenty of ways to get involved with AACPS student leadership. Join CRASC at our next hybrid town hall meeting on Wednesday, September 25th at 6:30, or our virtual town hall on October 9th. The 2024 to 2025 school year is off to a fantastic start, and we're excited for upcoming events like homecoming. That's all from me. Have a great night.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And now item 5.02, our PTA report.
Hello. Good evening, Dr. Bedell, Board of Education members and guests. Special welcome to our newest student member of the board, Hafsa Hamdoui. I practiced, did I say it right? I'm sorry. I really practiced. My name is Michael Vasquez. My pronouns are they, them. I'm Secretary of the Anne Arundel County Council of PTAs. The AACC PTA is looking forward to working with y'all this school year and in the future. I would like to start by welcoming all our new and returning teachers, administrators, bus drivers, building staff, and of course, the students. We hope that the 2024-25 school year is filled with fun, academic success, and lots of new friends. AACC PTA is committed to advocating for students, staff members, and school communities to help find ways to ensure that all students, teachers, staff, and community members get all the support they need to have a successful school year. AACC PTA and our local PTAs are committed to supporting y'all through this year in any way we can. Now for the latest updates. As of September 16th, 2024, we have 2 council officer positions open through the end of the 2024-2025 term, president and vice president positions. AACC PTA members will vote to fill these positions shortly. Our first AACC PTA meeting of the year will be held virtually on Monday, September 23rd, 2024 at 5:30 p.m. All county PTAs should have a member attend this meeting. Please email info@aaccpta.org for the link to register for meetings for the 2024-2025 school year. AACC PTA is excited for the 2024-2025 National PTA Reflections Program. The Reflections Program is an arts program for students in grades pre-K through 12. Student artists compete at the local, county, state, and national level PTAs in the categories of dance choreography, film production, photography, music composition, literature, visual arts, and special arts. AACC PTA's deadline for local PTA submissions is December 13th, 2024. To learn more about the program and to register your PTA, visit the Reflections page on the National PTA website at pta.org/reflections. For questions about the Reflections program, please email reflections@aaccpta.org. As a parent and a PTA member, I invite all parents, teachers, school staff, and eligible students and community members to join your local PTA this school year. Change at your school starts with involvement at your school. I also challenge the ACPS Board of Education members and central office employees to join at least one local PTA in our county. Finally, please let us know how we can support your PTA by contacting us on our newly redesigned website, which I did, at aaccpta.org. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. So the message, be present, be involved, and join your local PTA. Thank you so much. Item 5.03, a CAC report. We do not have a CAC report this evening. So we'll move on to item 5.04, Budget Committee report. Ms. Frank.
Thank you, President Silkworth. The Budget Committee met on September 16th, and our main objective was to put together a document of budget priorities after receiving input from the full board. The committee identified 5 priorities that will be reviewed tonight by the full board to be sent to the superintendent to be included in his budget that he will present back to the board. This item will be discussed tonight on agenda item 7.08. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Frank. So moving on to item 5.05, we have a TAC report this evening. Ms. Corona, good evening.
Hello, good evening. Good evening, President Silkworth, members of the Board of Education, and Dr. Bedell. While I've gotten to know many of you over the years and have spoken at board meetings before, this is my first time speaking as TAC president. For those in the audience attending tonight, here's some of my background. I've spent my entire 23-year career in ACPS. primarily as a high school English teacher. While I love being in the classroom, I'm excited to begin my 3-year term. In August, TAC launched our inaugural Leadership Development Conference, in which we empowered our union members to be able to advocate to improve their working conditions. All participants received the book, A Collective Bargain, Unions Organizing in the Fight for Democracy by Jane McAlevey. We'll be doing a book study soon. During the first week back, the TAC staff and myself visited about 40 schools to welcome back educators. We're continuing these visits throughout the year, making sure we reach every work site. Last week, we had our first representative assembly, which was well attended with lots of positive energy. The RAs are a monthly meeting of our building leaders. We welcome any board member to join us to address our building reps. We're glad to start a school year with the news that educator vacancies have gone down while student achievement has gone up. We also appreciate the implementation of the new cell phone policy. I know if I were still in the classroom, it would make a huge difference for me by having students less distracted and more focused on their learning. Unfortunately, it is disappointing that we're beginning the school year without a ratified contract, and we hope we can swiftly resolve our impasse so educators can begin to receive their salary increases this year. Over the last 3 years, we've seen a 4%, 6%, and 3% COLA, and we're glad that this board understands that paying educators fairly leads to better student outcomes. Increases in student achievement are not possible without the hard work of our educators who work every day in our schools to meet our students' academic as well as social emotional needs. While we've seen larger COLAs in the last 3 years than we have over the previous decade, last year's COLA was the only one that went significantly above the inflation rate. So it was the first time in many years that we've seen an increase in our salaries buying power. Due to the vacancy crisis, we understand that there was a need to focus on the recruitment, which led to a quick fix in collapsing salary steps 1, 2, and 3 to move up beginning educator pay. However, this happened without adjusting the entire pay scale. And this means that salaries of most educators still continue to lag behind those of surrounding counties. This must be addressed. We know that competitive salaries across the board are one key to teacher and educator retention. We also agree that other school staff deserve a living wage, including our food service workers, teaching assistants, custodial staff, school nurses, and bus drivers. We know that when there are vacancies in one job category, it creates stress on the whole system, hurting both students and educators. We also know that we cannot solve these issues by prioritizing one group at the expense of another. Our union looks forward to working with you to build a stronger school system together. We feel that under Dr. Bedell's leadership, we are turning a corner. However, another factor that impacts educator retention is stress and workload. The newly implemented formative assessment requirements have been an issue in this regard. There are also continuing challenges around Chromebooks, with many schools still experiencing shortages. Most importantly, many classroom teachers are still struggling with large class sizes, while many special educators and related service providers continue to have large caseloads. Every educator wants to be able to successfully complete all that's asked of them. When educators feel that they can't keep up with growing demands, that is when they decide to leave. This year, workload is an area that I'm hopeful we can work on. TAC always comes to the table looking to find solutions. We hope that you will join us as willing partners to find both the short and long-term solutions to the challenges educators are facing. I know there must be solutions that we can implement now with little or no budgetary impact. Ultimately, the long-term solution to workload is hiring more staff to reduce class sizes and caseloads across all schools. To do this, we invite you to join us to advocate together for the necessary county funding we need to address both workload and salary, securing the conditions we need to retain educators. Together, we can create the world-class school system that we all know AACPS has the potential to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to item 5.06, the President's Report. So on September the 5th, I had the opportunity to visit Severna Park Elementary School with Dr. Bedell. We also, on September the 6th, visited Park Elementary, Bell Grove Elementary, and Brooklyn Park Middle. And at each visit, what we saw was such excitement and such wonderful engagement between students, teachers, and staff. I am so very proud of all of our students, teachers, and staff for what for me has been a great opening of the new school year. On September the 9th, I had the opportunity to attend the first CAC meeting of the new school year. And as always, I am so impressed with the CAC leadership and the wonderful individuals who have volunteered their time to help our students in Anne Arundel County Public Schools. On September 11th, I attended a meeting of the Board of Directors for Scholarship for Scholars, thanks to Ms. Pam Van Diver, the Executive Director. This organization has provided and will continue to provide so many dollars, many scholarships for our students in Anne Arundel County. We are so lucky as a school system to have them with us. Our budget committee did meet, as Ms. Frank had indicated, on Monday. A great job, Ms. Frank. We did hold a workshop on Monday evening. That was the 16th here in the Board of Ed room, based on the fiscal year 2026 CIP and capital budget. Thanks to Dr. Heiser, Mr. Roof, and their staff for a great and comprehensive presentation there. And finally, the fall sports season, it's up and running. Many of us have had the opportunity to attend many games and activities. We want to commend our participating students on the field and in the stands for their positive support and good behavior. We remind everyone that our expectation is that everyone attend games and support students as they compete on the field. Our attention needs to be on the great athletes and coaches who are working so hard to do their very best. Our expectation is that everyone is on their very best behavior. Anyone who violates our established policies will be dealt with as per our previous directives. You could potentially lose your privilege to attend events for a period of time. Our stands are often filled with spectators. Our focus needs to be on the student athletes, not someone in the crowd. Let's all remember to respect one another, respect the game. So that concludes my report. We'll move on to item 5.07, Dr. Bedell, Superintendent's report.
All right, thank you, Mr. President. I want to start today with the topic I know is on everyone's minds, school safety. As I said in the message I put out last Friday, our hearts continue to be with all those in Georgia and Harford County as they heal from the tragedies in their communities. I want everyone to know that discussions about school safety are continuing for us, and they have been heightened in the wake of these tragedies. We have had them as a team, and I've discussed issues with the county executive and our board. Our team is discussing things such as weapon detection systems, and we're talking about non-evasive technology as an example. Clear backpacks, just part of the discussion, and other potential initiatives. They all come with positives and negatives. They all take time to implement. They aren't excuses. These are not excuses, but they are just facts, everybody. And so it is something that's going to require that we have conversation in this community, because we know as we engage the community in our strategic planning process, there was a lot of talk about safety above all else being one of the major areas of focus. Here's another piece that we need to mention. The most sure way to keep guns out of our schools is our communities. It's our elected officials and our schools to work together to keep children from bringing in weapons, not just guns, but all weapons. We just don't want them in our schools. What was once a sacred part of this country, where schools were always off the limits, has changed. We have a part to play, but so do our communities and elected officials. We have to change this mindset that, oh, well, this is a norm. We cannot accept that. We also have to talk to students about the often anonymous threats that are posted online. Superintendents and school districts are being ravaged around the country with all of these incidents that are taking place through social media. I feel like I'm receiving text messages 2 to 3 times a day from superintendents saying, "Are you guys dealing with this?" Yes, we are. I want to be clear that we will thoroughly investigate any report, but I also want to be clear that no report we have received to date has been deemed credible by the police. Many of these posts are old, come from other areas of the country, or contain school issues that reflect the school outside of our county if they mention a school at all. But what we also know is that we've seen our name mentioned within groups of schools. I understand the fear these posts incite, and I assure you, we will work with the police department to check every single one of them out. I'm asking our families to please help us by reporting these instances directly to police or schools so they can be handled quickly and without unnecessary spreading of rumors that may well turn out to be false. Finally, to note, we have intentionally created a position in this county to solely focus on school safety and security, to focus on social and emotional well-being of students and adults, and culture and climate. Because we do believe that if those areas are ripe, then it will 100% help minimize some of the stuff that's happening across our country. Next, I want to remind everyone about our Partners in Progress, moving AACPS forward. These events that we are holding will take place around the county. This is another chance for us to get out into our communities, provide some updates about our school system, and allow families and community members to interact with our cabinet members. The 1-hour events will begin at 6 p.m. at the sites you see on the screen. I hope everyone will take time to come out to these events. We were out at Chesapeake High School yesterday, packed parking lot. I thought everybody was there to see us. They were out watching their students. A lot of sporting events were taking place. So I even took an opportunity to go and watch me play Chesapeake High School in volleyball as our staff members were working with the people who did come. And so we look forward to continuing to engage. And so tomorrow we will be at Southern High School at 6 p.m. We are proud to have 5 National Merit Scholarship semifinalists this year. Because of the numerous opportunities the National Merit Scholarship Program opens up for students, this has been a key area of emphasis for us over the last year. A year ago, we had one National Merit Scholar. I have said before that it's not acceptable for a school system our size with our success to only have one National Merit Scholar. This is news. This news is an indication that our work that we're doing right now is paying dividends. And you all will hear on the Superintendent's Thursday Thought about the work that we're doing around pre-SAT and wanting to get that into our earlier exposure for our kids in grades 8 and 9, in addition to what we're doing for 10th graders and 11th graders. That will help us to continue to identify AP potential at a much earlier rate and then to figure out how to provide targeted support so that the school district can do a better job of pushing out more National Merit Scholars by the time these students take that actual SAT at the end of their junior year. And then finally, what we generally provide to you all is our continuous update on staffing. As you can see, 62 teacher vacancies. So we have continued to hire, and I know that we have more people that we're looking to hire and process in the pipeline. But I mean, we're almost nearly fully staffed in the school district. And again, we will see after the count day takes place at the end of, what is count day? Is it at the end of September or the end of October? So the end of September, because we also know that we have right now unofficially looks like this district has grown. And that means that there's going to be more requirements around all of these different areas, bus drivers, alternative vehicle drivers. You can see the custodians, the food service workers. We're working right now to address that in an aggressive manner. Athletic trainers, crossing guards, school nurses. So we will continue to work hard to try to get our vacancy rates to 0 to the best of our ability. But we also know that we can use support from the community as we get out and continue to promote opportunities here in the Anne Arundel County Public Schools. Mr. President, that concludes the superintendent's report.
Okay, I do see some lights. Ms. Frank.
Yes, thank you, President Silkworth. Dr. Bedell, I appreciate that you started your comments off with school safety. I think that was well stated in a couple of regards. I had a couple of points that I kind of wanted to ask and make at the same time. You talked about some non-invasive um, mitigation strategies that we're following up on. And I know that whenever something like this occurs, a lot of people will ask about metal detectors specifically and why don't we have them in our schools. And you mentioned pros and cons, and I wanted to put this out there to the public that Dr. Bedell has brought safety to this board well before the last couple of weeks, and we have had some very lengthy ongoing conversations around this. But just so that the public is aware, Dr. Bedell, could you discuss some of the negatives around metal detectors and why that's not something that we have pursued at this point?
Yeah, I think it's because I worked in a school district where we did have metal detectors. What it does is first of all, you have to wait in a line to get through. So inclement or cold weather really did produce some major concerns, not only for our students, but for our parents. But it's time consuming. There's a number of staff members that you also need to utilize to kind of help you get through that, along with SROs. And so it's something that I know a number of school districts have concerns with. But we also know that there is technology out here now that's different. When you go to a Ravens game, when you go to the Smithsonian Museum, for those of you who decide to go to live, not to gamble, but because you want to eat some good food, you can walk right through. So there is new non-invasive technology that will not allow for us to have students waiting in long lines. But what we also know, with the advancement of technology, there's a price tag that comes with it. And we understand that in our school district, you're talking about a number of entrances that have to take place. It's just not something that we can just fix overnight. And I want people to know that, to your point, Miss Frank, I'm gonna call you something else. I'm gonna call you Miss Corkadell. But Miss Frank, that we've actually brought to our board, as we're having conversations with some of the potential partners, we are bringing that into the board. Miss Jackson and I already came to the board and talked to them about one technology company that we think could work for us. We have another one that we're getting ready to meet with. So we're going to do our due diligence to try to secure our schools to the best of our ability. But we also know that we have to engage this community and have conversation, because there is a huge investment, and safety is important, it's going to cost. Simple as that. And we need to be able to make that investment.
Thank you. I appreciate those comments. I will just expand on the one part about a bottleneck. I mean, that in and of itself is a major safety concern. So personally, I would not support metal detectors if that was something that you brought to this board. So I'm glad that you are moving beyond sort of what we have seen in other places. I know that you are going to continue to bring this to us, and I appreciate it. And in addition to that, you have been very diligent with the capital projects with the vestibule, so I appreciate it.
Thank you. We're almost finished. It's taken a long time.
Miss Ellis.
Thank you. Ms. Frank really jumped on what I was going to comment on. I too appreciate Dr. Bedell, you leading with the safety concerns. There's another, I wanted to weigh in because I appreciated your saying that there's positives and there's negatives to these solutions. And one important consideration is the psychological effects of these atrocities around the country are undeniable. However, the solutions themselves can produce significant psychological effects. And if you have kids walking into a school through metal detectors every day, that's gotta have an impact. So ideally, we're going to come up with solutions where the kids don't feel it and aren't reminded every day as they're starting school. However, they'll know that they're being kept safe.
Yeah, I think the word just metal detector in general is triggering.
Yeah.
And even as we've talked about this in our cabinet meeting, we talk about non-evasive technologies because it's here. It's here. And generally you go to a sporting event. I mean, I've not experienced something major with weapons. We just haven't, because that technology allows for people to get in and out. And we do feel, I hate to say it, you're starting to feel safer at a Ravens game. Well, I haven't been to one yet, but safer at a Ravens game in some cases. So the technology exists. It's just, do we have the will to make the investments as a community as a whole?
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Corkadell.
Thank you, President Silkworth, and thank you, Dr. Bedell. I wanted just to give a good example. There's a lot of things. Prevention, of course, of the stuff on site, but another key piece is how the school community responds should an active event occur. And what was encouraging to me was seeing now, a couple decades later from that first major incident in our nation, and the subsequent iterations. Every time this comes up, we make a little bit more progress until something else supersedes it. But what's very encouraging is one of the students in Georgia gave permission to be interviewed. And what was clear and evident was, as he was describing his situation, was that what he was describing was the necessary steps, the barricading, the other things that are occurring. And he had that down, and they implemented it sight unseen while providing support for injured. And I just want to say that, yes, it does work. And yes, there is some coexisting trauma, but in that resiliency also comes a stronger community that well demonstrates that it is not in our space in the first place. But when it does happen, making sure that we have that training. And I know that the state legislature last session did address the sensitivity to a degree, but still recognize the need for us to make sure that every single person in our school communities and in this building at all times, we as a board, we're responsible for all of your safety while we're conducting our business. And so making sure that we are well trained and that our staff is well trained and is kept current is so incredibly important. I think we do an outstanding job of that. But for as much as I know that we do, I know that we can always do better if we have additional available resources. So I look forward to some of those opening up at the federal, state, and hopefully local level when the request is made. But once again, for the students to know what to do instinctually speaks droves to what training can do and how many lives are truly saved when we take those necessary steps, when we do the prevention techniques through screenings, and there's a variety of them out there that are not as trauma invoking, and to make sure we do have resources available for those who see that. But we cannot allow that to stop us from moving forward with our prevention efforts. So that involves conversations. And I know that Dr. Bedell and his team are always open to having those conversations with individual parents, students, staff members, and alike, confidentially and through the normal systems. So thank you very much for all that you're doing. This is a topic that should never, ever go away out of our minds. And I'm glad for it. And then on one last note, that Partners in Progress on Southern tomorrow night, I hope to see my fellow neighbors and residents. And I'll just say, as it relates to visiting the gym, we encountered that at Southern last time you were there having a listening conversation. And he walked right on in the gym and rooted on our Bulldogs. Spent a little time in the dog pound, and it was well appreciated, I know, for a fact. So we're looking forward to seeing everyone tomorrow night.
Absolutely.
Okay, Ms. Schauheim.
Yes, I think we all would be remiss if we didn't mention the other side of this. That is, as long as we tolerate as a society the use of weapons of war over our children's lives, this will continue to happen again and again and again and again. So I hope that our lawmakers will someday finally have the courage to chart a different course with regards to these things. So, because I value our students' lives more than I value automatic weapons or semi-automatic weapons of war. So I just want to point that out because that's something that I have not heard tonight from any of us, and it needs to be said. So there's that. When will it be enough? I thought Columbine was going to be enough, and this was after I was out of college. So I just ask, when will it be enough? Thanks.
Dr. Tobin.
Thank you. So I want to piggyback on all of my colleagues' comments. I'm very much in agreement with Ms. Frank's concerns about metal detectors. And I think another aspect of metal detectors is they give a false sense of security, which I think is even in some ways more dangerous. Because I've evaluated schools, charter schools that have had them, and come to find out that when families come in for PTA meetings at night, they don't have the staff to man the metal detectors. So families just walk in. Well, not to cast aspersions on those families, but somebody could leave something, plant something, whatever. I mean, so there are all sorts of issues with metal detectors. And I certainly understand as a parent myself, the feeling that there must be something. But I do think this needs to be very, very carefully considered, which brings me to the larger issue, which is it is, in my view, a sign of our failure as adults, and more importantly, a sign of a somehow deeply disordered society if we are willing to do things that effectively turn our children's schools into prisons or fortresses, when we know how developmentally unsound that is. And when we go against developmental needs, we harm children's growth and development and their academic success. So I think we have to step back and ensure that we don't get into a tail wagging the dog conversation here. We have to attend to security. We understand that. But when that becomes the driver, regardless of our students' educational, social, and emotional needs, something's gone very, very wrong. And a further illustration of this is exactly what Dr. Bedell said about cost. I do not, should I be on this board after November, I do not wish to face a situation where I have colleagues and others complaining about the growth of this budget when a huge portion has to be put towards security and thereby taken away from the things we know our students and our educators and our staff need. So I ask the community, I ask everyone here to remember what our end should be and what it should not be. And security should serve our students, not the other way around. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tobin. I thank all my colleagues for their comments. And so we're going to be moving on to our consent items, award of contracts, item 6.01 to 6.05. Do I hear a motion to bundle?
You do. Let's bundle them.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to bundle in a second. We have consensus. And we do. Dr. Bedell.
Thank you, Mr. President. The superintendent recommends that the Board of Education authorize the award of contracts under consent items numbered 6.01 through 6.05.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? Ms. Howe?
Ms. Dunn,
Aye.
Ms. Hamdawi,
Oh.
Ms. Frank,
Aye.
Dr. Tobin,
Aye.
Ms. Ellis,
Aye.
Ms. Corkadell,
Aye.
Ms. Schallheim,
Aye.
and Mr. Silkworth.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, so we're moving on to item 7.01, administrative personnel appointments. Dr. Bedell.
Mr. President, the superintendent recommends that the personnel listed on the attached sheet be promoted and/or appointed as discussed in executive close.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Ms. Howe?
Ms. Dunn,
Aye.
Ms. Frank,
Aye.
Dr. Tobin,
Aye.
Ms. Ellis,
Aye.
Ms. Corkadell,
Aye.
Ms. Schallheim,
Aye.
Mr. Silkworth.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, we're moving on to item 7.02, first reading, non-discrimination code AC. Ms. Wilson.
Good evening, President Silkworth, Vice President Frank, members of the board, and Dr. Bedell. For the record, I'm Grace Wilson, Senior Legislative and Policy Specialist for the district, here this evening to discuss policy AC, non-discrimination, which is before you on first reading. This policy was last revised in November of 2022 and is being updated in accordance with Senate Bill 413, which passed the Maryland General Assembly during the 2024 legislative session, and prohibits discrimination based on military status in housing and employment. The revisions proposed to this policy would prohibit discrimination in AACPS educational programs and employment based on military status, and I'd be happy to take any questions you may have.
Ms. Corkadell.
Thank you. Hold on, let me pull it up. Thank you so very much. I remember all of these very well. We have multiple. And so I wondered if you could just refresh memory just a little bit, because I may have even asked this back in 2022 as an ongoing concern. So the first is, I know that we are doing a lot of mirroring of specific language, particularly in this one above all. So I know that we have others that expand on similar issues. So that being stated, we have contract workers here. We have co-curricular, extracurricular activities. And we also provide transportation services. And I am wondering if it is more appropriate elsewhere, or if it is appropriate to add to that profile when we get to section 3, because I wouldn't put it necessarily in the very first section, right, when we're referring to students and employees. But in section 3, I'm just wondering if the language covers all those other things, and if not, what policy, at policy level, not at regulation level, do we include those contractors with the co-curriculars, all of that stuff, transportation?
I can certainly double check to make sure this information is accurate, but my understanding at this time is employment covers any employment with AACPS. So if you're an AACPS contractor, this would cover you as well. And then the educational program encompasses everything we do to provide education for our students. But let me double check that my interpretation of those is correct.
Yeah,
I'll
and like
report back to the
volunteers,
next
for
meeting.
example, because volunteers and contractors, I know that's very, very sensitive because they would not be considered an employee technically, or otherwise they would be an employee. You know what I'm saying? Like there's very specific language that differentiate between a contractor and a
Sure, and this
yeah.
isn't specific to employee, it's specific to employment, but I'll get you a definite
Yeah,
answer
yeah, if I
before
could
second
just-
reason.
I just want to make sure we're covering them, because as we continue to evolve, and this topic continues to evolve, making sure that everybody knows that we have those right protections in place. And as I said, they may be more appropriate elsewhere in other sections, because we do expand more beyond hate, for example, in other areas on bias, just, the other discriminations. Thank you. And then my other one is, speaking of making sure, I noticed that you added military status.
Mhm.
In A, the list in B, in section C2B, also looks to be the same except for it doesn't have military status. Would that be because it's covered or the section is different? Or
It's a different section. The law that I'm speaking to only requires it in housing and employment. I felt that given the community we serve, that extending the discrimination protections to military students and their families in our educational programs would be appropriate. But what you're seeing there was a state law that came directly for prospective students. So I would recommend leaving that verbatim and letting
Okay.
Section 2A do the work for you here on employment and educational programs.
No, I'm just trying to understand, where we have those different things. And then lastly, just really quick, and this is, I know this is a little stylist, but I think when we use a phrase like hate group in section 4A, for example, by an identified hate group designed to promote the message of the hate group, is that the state definition, or is that?
Believe that section is directly out of state law. I was
Yeah.
involved in the 2020 revisions, and that's my recollection, but I'll also confirm that for you on second reading.
Yeah, if we could just get a clarification on that, that would be great, because I would just want to make sure that if it is not clearly already defined in state law, that we do not wait for its regulation, because when a person is wondering if they're discriminated against, first thing they're going to pull up is policy. And especially because it's always referenced, well, that's a board thing, even sometimes when it's not. So that's one of the first things they pull up. And that is a space where I think if it's not already defined, that if maybe to consider. And then lastly, the other thing was in 4B. I'm just wondering why we would not have included the electronic, social media, and other things, because we are calling out very specific things and then we say all others. But I think that is a space where the average family has its greatest concern. Our threats generate from there. A lot of our discriminatory practices and the way students are bullied and discriminated, and adults alike are discriminated against, is all over all those social media things and electronically vis-a-vis emails. And I just maybe if we could look into what that would look like. And
Again, my recollection is that this language came verbatim out of state law, which may be why it wasn't included, is because state law didn't apply it to those circumstances, but I'll certainly confirm for you on second reading.
Yeah, I was just thinking of the few things that I know that when people read these drafts and we're receiving comments that I have either heard in the past or are hearing in current, and I would just like to get on top of that on our first reader so that we're moving fully, because a lot of times, honestly, we shouldn't be messing with the state language. I just want to make sure but there are spaces where we can express to what extent in its expansion, just like the military status, for example, to make it perfectly clear. And so that there is no omission equals, therefore not. And in the social media realm and electronic emails, yes, most certainly. I think that. And then if I just made President Silkworth a question I always get asked with all of these policies, because this is a policy in A, does it apply to the Board of Education? And so could you just remind the public and the board which policies like this actually we are required to uphold at all times as if we are in employment?
Absolutely. The Board of Education is the responsible office for this policy and regulation. So you all are the ultimate holders of this work, and you are subject to it as well.
And so we are subject to uphold it at all times. There's no differentiation. The only difference is that our bosses are sitting in Baltimore, on Baltimore Street, not here at AACPS, correct?
Mhm.
Okay, thank you very much.
Ms. Frank?
Yes, thank you. I somewhat remember the last time that this policy came before the board, and I had a similar question that I'm going to ask now. It discusses hate groups, hate symbols, etc. Is there a comprehensive list of what is considered a hate group?
I'm sorry. I need to look back at the state law on this to get you an answer on that question.
Specifically, while you're hunting that down, groups like, I believe Miss Ortiz, and I could be wrong because this was years ago, I believe she cited the ACLU is one of the groups that are looked to provide what is and what is not a hate group. I would like to clarify that and see if that is the case, and where the sort of authority for that comes from.
Absolutely. And that conversation was 2 years ago, and I don't want to misquote my memory, so I'll certainly look into that and get back to you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're moving on to item 7.03, technology use and security.
For the record, again, Grace Wilson, Senior Legislative and Policy Specialist. Policy DI, Technology Use and Security, is before you this evening on first reading. The policy was last reviewed in 2016, and staff have recommended minor revisions, including updating the purpose paragraph to include hardware and removing repetitive language from position statement 1. And I'd be happy to take any questions you may have on this policy.
Ms. Corkadell.
Thank you, President Silkworth. Just a holistic question. As we move further into AI and technology use in that regard, that is usually a standalone conversation. But it also occurs to me that in the meantime, or as it relates to security and securing of the device and the use of the device itself, and this may be a regulatory appropriate thing, but it seems to me like using our devices to, use AI for all the things that are nefariously listed in there. Also, it's so unique. It almost seems like sits different than the actual device itself, because the device is the tool, just like a pencil, instead of it in and of itself. And as it's written, it's it in and of itself. And I know that sounds a little garbolish but it really isn't. It is just a little more technical than perhaps, but we're in a
Yes.
business meeting.
So what staff has been having conversation for a number of years around artificial intelligence. We were initially waiting to see if the State Department of Education and the U.S. Department of Education would provide guidance on AI. They have since both passed at that opportunity. So staff began actually meeting this week to discuss AI and how we want to address it as a school system. We chose not to do it in this policy and regulatory upgrades. To your point, this is an ever-evolving, changing field of technology and of best practice guidance. So we're going to work on that, conduct that work over the next year and come back with a separate guidance or policy or regulation at a later date.
When we get to the second reader, Dr. Vidal, it may be helpful for folks to understand where that does live currently. And it's probably regulatory, because I know in policy it's in its broader still, just to your point that you were saying, of the nexus, because it may, what I don't want is someone to not read something and then make an assumption that there is not accountability to those things, because that technology it's not just about did they cheat or did they copy us something in the syllabus, in the syllabi, or a copyright infringement, which I know teachers and principals have to be very sensitive to. But also it can instruct some of that non-discrimination things and some of the bad things that we are trying to abate. And that is a part of our security, because they can jump into it, right? The airdrops and that sort of thing. So if we could, I'd just love some clarification in a future read, not necessarily any recommended edits for this, but.
And I'm sorry, Ms. Corkadell, just to clarify your question, are you looking for if our regulation addresses AI specifically?
Yeah. Where does the regulation live that addresses using our device to use AI for things that are not permitted?
I will say I do believe that some of our policies and regulations, for example, our academic integrity policy addresses technology generally, which we're interpreting as including artificial intelligence. But as part of that conversation of staff, we will be taking a look at all of our policies and regulations and determining if there's going to be
Yeah, for the non-academic, actually, I'm referring to that non-academic space. I'm referring to that bullying space. I'm referring to that taking someone's principal's image and distorting it in some way, and they're using our device, sending out emails, using our devices, using our phones. You know, that
And
would
that
include
is
me
addressed.
too, right? I couldn't go out and start doing things.
That is addressed
Yeah.
with this policy.
Okay, so that
regulation.
is
If you're
addressed.
using AACPS hardware, which includes laptops, devices, that kind of thing, it is addressed in this policy and regulation.
Okay, and in reverse too, if someone's entering in, right?
Yes.
Okay. But
Okay, seeing no more lights, we'll move on to item 7.04, 2025 legislative program. Dr. Bedell.
Thank you, Mr. President. As Ms. Wilson gets ready to take us through this, I'll just go ahead and give the recommendation. Superintendent recommends approval of the 2025 legislative program pending conclusion of her presentation.
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Bedell. Good evening again. Grace Wilson, Senior Legislative and Policy Specialist. The 2025 legislative program is before you this evening for adoption. As a reminder, this document summarizes the board's 2025 legislative positions and priorities without precluding consideration of any additional legislation or budget issues that arise during the Maryland General Assembly session. Just wanted to once again call attention to the board's priority areas of focus for the 2025 session. Those are flexibility in the school day and school year and construction funding for pre-K expansion. And I'd be happy to take any questions you may have regarding the legislative program.
Okay, I don't see any, I do have a light. Miss Ellis.
Thank you. Give us time. I'm a little slow. So once again, I want to thank everyone involved in giving us a little time with this process this time around. I think it should always be this way. I won't be in this seat next year, but I think for the sake of the entire board and the entire school system, doing this important work deserves its time to get it right. That being said, because I have been very outspoken on that, I did go through the legislative program carefully. I had told you, Ms. Wilson, I'd probably have some follow-up. I reflected on this greatly. I have been pretty outspoken every time we vote on this. I do have some philosophical differences with where we have landed every year up until now. Yes, I am sitting here in this board seat as a member of this board that is overseeing this public school system. However, our charter schools, our contract schools, our private schools, excuse me, provide a very valuable service that throughout the country makes our public schools better. If we didn't have education alternatives, we wouldn't grow. And so, and interestingly, with the blueprint coming out and the dollars following the student, it would seem that, you know, cutting off these opportunities for students who don't have the means, their families don't have the means to seek out alternatives. I just philosophically, I consider our responsibility here to educate the students that are in our buildings. If it turns out that sometime in the future there were some model where there's many different education options that students are taking advantage of, and we have half the students that we have now, I would still take it as my responsibility to educate those students in a top-notch world-class school system. So I don't have this need for every student in the county to attend our public schools. That is, I think, a family's decision. I'm sorry to go on about this. I don't want to take up everyone's time, But for me to be able to support this legislative program, I had to make a statement. That being said, I do believe that my community that I represent would largely support the program, so I'm not going to, I didn't see anything new or added to the program that brought me concern, but I just had to share this.
Thank you. So, questions? No request for revisions, just a couple shout outs of thank you. Which, let me pull it up there, so that's the one we didn't put in there too. Where's it at? Where's it? 8. Adequate and equitable funding for programs and resources to support acceleration for students who are reading below level. The state is going to be adopting a 3rd grade reading requirement that has a series of necessary steps that school districts, which are probably doing a lot of already, but it will be differently structured. It is running in tandem with our science of reading, and to continue to make progress on some of the challenges that our students are facing post-COVID, because there is nothing that is being required that does not require money, quite frankly. This will be coming in as an unlimited mandate unless or requires the local government to additionally spend, not ask us to take away from the few funds that we have for our existing students. And so I want to thank you for putting that in there. I think this is going to be a space where we're going to be having some additional conversations. I do know that the intent of all of this is for the betterment of our students, and they will definitely benefit. Getting that adequate and equitable funding for the programs and resources that we're discussing is going to be Herculean, and I am appreciative of the addition. Likewise, on page 29, when we are talking about special education and specialized instruction, there were a lot of changes and updates made, and I thank you very much, because I think that better positions us to be able to advocate, not just at the local level, but also at the federal level, because the time has come for the feds. And then lastly, I love the addition of, on page 31, as it relates to addressing food insecurities. We have an obligation, we have a moral obligation as it relates to feeding. We know the nexus is clear and evident between health and learning, but our dollars are designated to educate. And so we love those partnerships, but those partnerships have to be interactive a little bit more. And I love the way you've worded that. The inclusive mechanism to launch and coordinate these policies is so much needed. And it's not because our communities of hope, because our food bank and all those others are not doing their part, but now we need to take it to the next level. Now we have truly quantified in a data-informed way what the actual needs are. And now that we have that information, there is no good reason not to start to develop strategies to implement. So I love this language, and I think this language will carry us in the spaces we need to for advocacy. So thank you very much. And just a reminder, legislative session, just the state piece, not even counting the county, not counting the feds, and all of the other policy work, is in and of itself 3 people, 3 FTEs, and you're doing it all in one, and doing an outstanding job of it. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. And I will say the legislative program is always a team effort. So I'd like to thank the staff who brought those ideas to me as well. I couldn't have done it without them.
Ms. Frank?
Yes, thank you. I have never voted for our legislative program. I will not be changing that tonight. I do not support a lot of what is in this program, and I do not support a lot of the language that's contained therein. specifically one of the first meetings that we ever had. It was moved to include Black Lives Matter into our legislative program. I thought at the time that was an extremely political move, and I still continue to believe that. So I will not be voting for this tonight. And if I were on the board for 4 more years, which thankfully I won't be, I would not vote for it with that language included ever. Thank you.
Ms. Schallheim.
I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for your work on this. I know it's not just you. I know you have a team behind you. I know this cuts across probably every department in central office and in satellite offices. And I've always been very supportive of front loading our delegation with just the words in black and white for them all to consider. So we avoid things like unfunded mandates. So we avoid items that would just totally trample local control, which I truly believe in. And so I just wanted to say thank you. And I will be absolutely supporting this as I have every year. Thanks.
Okay, seeing no more lights, I also would like to thank you, Ms. Wilson, and the entire staff for a collaborative effort. So having said that, I know we had a motion. Did we get a second? So we have a motion and a second. Is there any more discussion? Ms. Howe?
Ms. Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Hamdawi?
Aye.
Ms. Frank?
Nay.
Dr. Tobin?
Aye.
Ms. Ellis?
Aye.
Ms. Corkadell?
Aye.
Ms. Schallheim?
Aye.
Mr. Silkworth?
Aye.
Motion passes 7-1.
Okay, so we'll move on to item 7.05, Superintendent's Recommended Fiscal Year 2026 Capital Budget and 6-Year Capital Improvement Plan. Dr. Bedell.
Thank you, Mr. President. The superintendent recommends that the Board of Education adopt the FY 2026 capital budget, 6-year plan, and state capital improvement plan. This was a workshop was held on this presentation on Monday.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? Seeing no lights, Ms. Howe?
Ms. Dent? Ms. Hamdawi?
Aye.
Ms. Frank?
Aye.
Dr. Tobin?
Aye.
Ms. Ellis?
Aye.
Ms. Corkadell?
Aye.
Ms. Schallheim?
Aye.
Mr. Silkworth?
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Okay, moving on to item 7.06, Educational Specifications, Carver Early Education Center. Dr. Bedell.
Thank you, Mr. President. The superintendent recommends approval of the Carver Early Education Center educational specification for the community's knowledge. This is a school project that we are targeting to be completed in 2026 with a state-rated capacity of 120 students as we continue to grow our early education programs in Anne Arundel County Public Schools.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second, a light, Ms. Schallheim.
I just want to say again, I know I said this at the workshop. I want to state again for anyone who missed that on Monday, that I think that this is a truly fantastic way to utilize that space. It tackles problems that we were having with capacity. And I know it doesn't solve it countywide, far from, but what a great idea. And I'm just delighted to support that. I've been told in the past that one of the other satellite locations where I think it currently being occupied, although it shouldn't be by any humans at this point, but at our transportation division at another site. And it would be great to see if that could potentially be turned around to for more innovation down the road. Just putting it into the universe. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schallheim. I see no more lights. I would just say that, oh boy, I taught for 49 years, spent a lot of time at Carver Center. Hate to see it go, but what a great reason for it to be repurposed. This is absolutely marvelous. So I see no more lights. Ms. Howe.
Ms. Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Hamdawi?
Aye.
Ms. Frank?
Aye.
Dr. Tobin?
Aye.
Ms. Ellis?
Aye.
Ms. Corkadell?
Aye.
Ms. Schallheim?
Aye.
Mr. Silkworth?
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Okay, item 7.07, Central Elementary School third-party project playground improvements. Dr. Bedell.
Mr. President, the superintendent recommends approval of the Central Elementary School third-party project playground improvements.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Ms. Corkadell.
Okay, got jumped on that one for my local district project. Thank you very much, fellow colleagues. Although I did not grant the motion, that does not mean that I am not highly supportive of this. So I want to thank Principal Thompson for sharing with the board exactly what the scope of this project entails. And just to tell the folks, in 2019, when I first came into the seat, I made an amendment, and the amendment was passed and also funded by the council and the county executive, and that was to add additional dollars to the playground capital improvement program. And the reason I did that, because the school at the time that was top of my mind, although I know it continues to benefit many others, was Odenton Elementary at that time. That we're having just a heck of a time fundraising, because some communities have more resources than others to do the fundraising. And unfortunately, in the scope of our budget, we have a limit, and that limit does not always necessarily include that. That program and that project was designed to inch away at that backlog and ensure that if a playground does have to get shut down, that we have the resources to get it back up online, because we don't, I don't think anyone considers a bag of balls a playground equivalency for our kids, but sometimes that was happening. We have made great strides because that fund has continued to receive full funding from the county, and that is awesome. In Central Elementary School's case, the PTO was able to successfully fundraise. And let me just tell you, to fundraise the well over $100,000 that this is including is a Herculean effort. And it takes caring, commitment, and a passion to make sure that our kids, from beyond the scope of the parents of the immediate kids at Central Elementary, it takes an entire community. And I know it took our community, and we stepped up to the plate, as we always do at Central Elementary, which is the home of my kids' elementary education. But Principal Thompson also wrote about what it's going to do. And when the PTO set this up, this was not just some other playground. They included extensive planning the needs of our special education classes, which include our ACC classrooms and our autism specialty sites that is unique to Central Elementary. We are also next door neighbors with Central Special too. So we know that our needs are great. They worked incredibly diligently, as Principal Thompson reported to the board, to ensure that they are representing the priorities of our school, our community, and all of our stakeholders in the efforts. And those are our true priorities. So I always applaud third-party projects, because that means that the community has stepped up. They've met the needs of the resources directly, and we're able to move forward. So thank you guys very much for all that you have done. It is greatly appreciated and always underrated as to the work and commitment necessary to fundraise. This is a capital fundraising enterprise level project, and they did so very successfully. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Seeing no more lights, Ms. Howe.
Ms. Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Hamdawi?
Aye.
Ms. Frank?
Aye.
Dr. Tobin?
Aye.
Ms. Ellis?
Aye.
Ms. Corkadell?
Aye.
Ms. Schallheim?
Aye.
Mr. Silkworth?
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Okay, we're moving on to item 7.08. That's our fiscal year 2026 board budget priorities. Ms. Frank.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Mosier, I believe, got a lovely slide for us. So thank you so much to the folks in communications for putting that together for us. There are a couple things that I want to preface this conversation with. And the first is These are in no particular order, and these can be changed this evening by amendment. Once the board chooses to adopt a final version, that will go to the superintendent, and the superintendent obviously is here for the conversation, so he can, add into his budget what he gets the sense from the board, but he'll also have this document. So these are in no particular order. I know we've talked a lot about security tonight, so the fact that that is at the bottom of the list doesn't mean that that is a lesser priority. It just means that that was the where it landed in the conversation because we went back and forth across priorities. So to be a little bit more specific, we have mental health supports, compensation increases for food service employees, increased funding for extracurricular activities, positions for class size reduction, and funding to enhance security efforts. Under the mental health supports, we specifically discussed school health counselors, school psychologists, and pupil personnel workers. There were a few others that individual board members had brought up, but those were the ones that were consistent across multiple groups of members. For number 2, continue to support compensation efforts competitive with other LEAs. Those specifically were cafeteria workers and restorative supports. And then number 3, extracurricular programs to allow for district-wide equity. We were looking at competitive activities specifically. So things that were engaged in competitions. We had a lot of folks come in and talk about robotics last year. And when we dug into that, it wasn't just robotics that was seeming to be not funded at the same levels as other groups. So we wanted to kind of look at that holistically, and that was part of the conversation there. Number 4, we wanted to look at specialized instruction. So it wasn't just special education, but it was also that gifted and talented group. So we used the terminology specialized instruction because we thought it encompassed more of what more board members were looking for. And then finally, number 5, for the security efforts with the understanding that capital projects are in the works. We wanted to be very specific about recognizing the work that is currently being completed, because this is not the board or the superintendent just taking a look at security efforts. A lot of these have been ongoing for many years in several of these categories. And specifically, we wanted to look at risk mitigation programs and emergency preparedness programs. So with that, if there are any questions, I would be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Okay, well, I see some lights. First of all, Ms. Shalheim.
Thank you. I want to note for mental health workers or mental health supports that we also include social workers in that. It might not have come up in your committee meeting, but I think that's an important position to include in that set. So hopefully it will be taken into account. In terms of the extracurricular activities, I mean, I agree. I brought a motion as far back as 2019 with robotics at dark 30 in the morning. I think it was Amendment 80 or whatever it was. So I completely agree with this, but I think that it should be noted that this also should include summer programming and specifically things that were supported during COVID times, and with those dollars continuing in an equitable fashion going forward. And I'm going to be very specific here, including North Bay Music Camp. I cannot stress this enough. This is their equivalent programming to, say, going to state for athletics or anything else like that. That's their one sort of special bit of programming beyond the all county instruction. So I just wanted that to be on record, both of those two things, that yes, extracurricular activities, also summer programming, also including specific things that might otherwise fall off the list entirely, to stay as part of our complement of what we offer with equity, ensuring that, folks from all corners of the county can participate. So those were my 2 comments. Thank you.
Ms. Ellis.
Thank you. First of all, I appreciate the work of the Budget Committee. Did a great job putting this all together. I think we've ended up with a good list that probably just largely encompasses what this board is here for. Just one little comment about the extracurricular activities. I appreciate the many conversations that this board has had, really showing our support and the need to increase support for activities that are not necessarily athletics, because athletics have historically received a lot of support and a lot of funding. I guess my one concern about restricting it to competitive activities, while I recognize there are many activities that probably serve more social and fun sort of purposes, which are important for students. There could be other activities that are not necessarily competitive, but still serve a huge purpose for the betterment of the student and really reflecting well on their college applications, their employment applications, something like some sort of community service activity, which could require transportation to go someplace to get that done. So just a little food for thought. I'm not sure how you expand that without still being specific to those activities that are really serving the purpose of growth in students. But just a little food for thought. Thank you.
Ms. Corkadell.
Thank you, President Silkworth, and thank you to our chair, Ms. Frank, Vice President Frank, because that is a lot of work and effort to put in. And when she gets it, she gets up to eight lists of budget priorities and things that we want to do. What I like about this process is that, of course, amendments come in. And amendments are those very specific things. I want X amount of dollars sitting in this bucket for this program, for robotics, for music, for X, Y, and Z. This is a bigger budget priority, as indicated here, that says these are the areas that we know we have the greatest need of focus at this moment in time. It doesn't mean that everything else is forgotten about and not discussed, actually, quite to the contrary. But this gives an idea of where our priorities are landing, because we could discuss, but honestly, those are amendments. Priorities are those focuses and those bigger buckets. And then each individual board member has the opportunity to work with staff and the superintendent on those specific issues, but regardless of whether it's district or for the benefit of the whole. And that is how we have been operating with each passing year. So I appreciate us keeping it to something where you can genuinely call it a priority, and being broad enough where many people can see the spaces that they know, the places that we want to get to in general. And then the specifics, such as several members have suggested, all go to the superintendent, regardless of whether or not we bring them up tonight. I think it does create a framework for where our values are. And so when we said things like for specialized instruction, for example, that is a bigger and broader than just special education. It also accommodates those other fringe areas, whether it's a 504, whether it's for an ALPS program, or to have someone follow their passion. What we are seeing now, I think, is a evolution, though, overall in our budget priorities as we get further along in blueprint and the implementation of and what that looks like. So when I look at our priorities, I see things like our ability to better address our literacy outcomes and goals. I see things where we are offering more opportunities for college and career readiness for the CCR pillar, and getting better overall quality education and having the resources to meet the students where they are. It starts with healthy food every single day and making sure our kids are well fed, and goes down the line to making sure that they are safe and sound and that their whole life has enrichments relevant to their education. So I think all of us as colleagues really landed kind of in the same space, maybe with slightly different details. So I think overall that mental health piece remains and sits hard and heavy on all of our hearts and minds, and continues to do so, as well as these other needs. This is a very brief summary, folks, of a lot more detail that the staff will see in the coming days and weeks ahead. And now is the time to definitely engage, because this is when the core draft of the budget is being formulated at the county levels. End of September, departments already have their drafts made. So now is the time for us to have these hard conversations and work forward. And then lastly, President Silkworth, if I just may remind our county partners that we only have 2 hearings for our bandwidth and our timeline for the budget. And it would be really appreciated if we could just have 1 year where our staff can actually have a conversation with us about our budget specifically, and not miss an opportunity to be in one of the districts expressing and advocating for their needs at the same time. And likewise, parents having to make that decision of who do I talk to, because I may have more than one need. I see no good reason, since they don't schedule them till so late in dates, not to be accommodating so that we can hear from all of our folks and they can hear from all of their folks, which include our folks in addition to, because it is very frustrating. They've got to make decisions. Do they come talk to us about our budget, or do they go to talk to them about our budget? And it's often can't be both. So as we work through this process, I hope that we can get some dates together so that people do have that ability to advocate at all the seats at the tables and at all tables. Thank you very much. And I know there's going to be a lot of heavy work with Mr. Sinsky's team and every single department. So it is greatly appreciated work. And I look forward to another great budget year.
Ms. Hamdawi.
Thank you, President Silkworth. First, I would like to begin by thanking Ms. Frank and the entirety of the Budget Committee. It is so incredibly difficult to take a plethora of priorities and wants and needs from all these different board members and form it into a cohesive budget priority list, but it was done. And so I thank you for that. It's a good list. I can say that. I think I'd like to echo what Ms. Schelheim said in regards to social workers and their position in the mental health support staff category. I think that is an important role that cannot be overlooked. I think something we also need to consider is that we can't just recruit these mental health support staff. We can't just hire them. We have to ensure that we're retaining them. Some of these positions do have fairly high turnover rates, and so that is something to consider in the coming weeks and months. I am also thrilled to see that equity was mentioned in the extracurricular programs. If you know me, you know it's something that I am always talking about. But to see that on the priority list it's nice to see. We sometimes can, there are differences in the opportunities available to certain students in certain schools, and the difference is pretty evident when you visit said schools. So I'm very pleased to see that that is on there. I think that's it. But again, thank you to Ms. Frank and everyone on this, and let's hope for a good budget season.
Thank you, Ms. Hamdawi. Ms. Frank.
Yes, once you get through budget season, you might have a few gray hairs. I know I do. So at the appropriate, I got a couple. I didn't before this. At the appropriate time, Mr. Silkworth, would you like me to make a motion, or would you prefer
Answer is
somebody?
yes.
Huh?
Yes.
Okay, great.
We have a few more lights.
Okay, so just come back to me on that. I did want to address a couple of points that some of my colleagues have made. This is not a comprehensive list. If it says increased positions on mental health supports, there were a few that we mentioned specifically, but we also kept it, as sub points because the broader bucket was important. But those were just 3 needs that multiple members may have addressed. So by no means is it restrictive to those sub points. So I did want to kind of clarify that. And then additionally, once again, this in no way prohibits board members from amending either this document or one budget night. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Tobin.
Thank you. So yes, also thank you to the Budget Committee. I know this is a lot of work and it's much, much appreciated. I just wanted to add, as the slide we have here says compensation increases for food service employees, I want people to understand that that too, I think, is intended actually to be broader than it sounds, because it was, I think, really about some of our lowest paid employees and the need to pay additional attention to their needs in this respect. But that also brings me to something, and Ms. Hamdawi referenced it, as have others. I think a thread that always goes through this, all of these things, of course, is equity. And most importantly, we don't want to add things that increase inequity. So when we are looking at, for example, increased funding for extracurricular activities, which, can easily include summer programs and so forth, we obviously undercut that if we don't also include things like transportation that go with them, because you're then simply making it that much more difficult if you don't include those things for students who don't have access to transportation to participate. And so I think that is just something I would say. I mean, it's as all things should be. All of this, I presume, will be aligned with our strategic plan. Obviously, equity runs through all of that. And I just, want to say for the purposes of how I understand these priorities, which really are a sort of guiding statement for the superintendent and his staff of what is top of mind for the board, what we expect to see as focus in the budget that is presented. So as Dr. Bedell is always fond of saying, there will be no surprises. That this in this guidance obviously goes through all of this, an assessment of how we can make these determinations with an eye to equity, and even more importantly, not creating additional inequities. Thank you.
Ms. Schellheim, your light on again?
Yes, it is. So just to make this a little bit more specific, and I know it's intended to be general and sort of all-encompassing within the particular item. So when I think of extracurricular activities, I think of during the academic year. And so at the appropriate time, I would love to amend that line to say increase funding for extracurricular activities and summer programming, just to be sure that both are included, again, equitably. So is now a good time?
No,
No. You'll let me know.
I will. Ms. Ellis.
Yeah, sorry, I know I already spoke once, but Dr. Tobin brought up the food service employees. It just reminded me, I did want to make a remark on that because, a lot of times you can see where the problems are when you just look at the numbers, and we get that weekly update on staffing that we just received this evening, and the issue is clear. And so this is absolutely needs to be a priority. Thank you.
Okay, so I just wanted to clarify also, when we're talking about compensation increases, that includes all of our employees. We're not just focusing on one set. And so I wanted to make sure that was said. Actually, my colleagues alluded to that, of course. I do want to thank Ms. Frank for her great leadership in this regard. She's done a great job for that. These categories are general, but this provides, we believe, the wherewithal for all of our students to be able to belong, grow, and succeed. And so, having said that, Ms. Schauheim, I think it may be appropriate if you'd like to present that motion.
Point of order, we would make a motion on what is presented first, and then motions of amendment would be made, President Silkworth.
Okay, so Ms. Frank.
I move to adopt the operating budget priorities that were approved by the Budget Committee on Monday, September
Second.
16th.
Okay,
Second.
we have a motion, we have a second.
Mhm.
I'm not seeing any lights. Ms. Frank.
I do want to mention one more thing. I'm sorry. First, I definitely want to thank Ms. Howell for helping me to put this document together. I neglected to do so, but she was tremendous as part of that meeting, and I would be remiss not to include her. The second point I want to make is, even since this budget meeting, I mean, things are constantly evolving. I had a meeting with Dr. Bedell, and we had some transportation discussions. And had I had that meeting first, I may have included that. So this is intended to be a bit fluid, is a great word. So as the community brings concerns to the board, we still encourage you to do that, because there's still things that we need to make sure that are addressed. And I believe that we will continue to see that all the way through the budget cycle and the budget hearing. So please continue to bring those forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Frank. Ms. Schauheim.
All right, I move to amend the motion to specifically the third point to read increased funding for extracurricular activities and summer programming.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and we have a second. Ms. Corkadell.
Thank you, President Silkworth. This is a question for Dr. Bedell. Dr. Bedell, our summer programming has academic, right? We have academic programs, right? We have co-curricular programs, right? And we have extracurricular programs, correct? So things like music enhancement things, those are extracurricular, correct? Not co-curricular.
Yeah, we call those enrichment programs. So you
Enrichment.
have summer enrichment programs, which give students that additional exposure to some of the fine arts, and maybe perhaps non-academic opportunities to grow.
But is it a subcategory of extracurricular, or is it its own category as a summer enhancement?
Not that I'm aware of. I guess I'll have to. No.
Are they different or the same?
I've never heard of it being a separate. I think it's all inclusive. We have a portfolio of offerings that we provide during summer school for our students. So whether it's students who need credit recovery or that they've been retained and they need to continue school for those purposes, in addition to the enrichment activities.
I'm saying that because if extracurricular is the top of the pyramid and there's a bunch of stuff below that includes summer enrichment, then we're calling out one subcategory of the bigger extracurricular. If, on the other hand, summer enrichment programs, such as is being referenced by colleague, is not an extracurricular activity, then that does make sense. But if it's a subcategory, I would be a little caution of doing so because of equity, not having all the other subcategories, I guess, which is why we said extracurricular, to capture the multitude of the activities. So,
Mr. Stansky.
Good evening. For the record, Matt Stansky, Chief Financial Officer. I don't have much to add for what Dr. Bedell has described. I mean, it is our sort of view of extracurricular is sort of that all-encompassing.
That
to
includes
include
summer enrichment,
Summer
right?
enrichment,
Okay.
both academic, social, emotional, what have you.
Okay, so based on that, as it reads, it already includes it. So I would not be for calling out one particular subcategory of extracurricular, because then we're going to be back to the very specifics, which is more like a budget amendment. Thank you.
Ms. Ellis.
To weigh in sort of similarly. And I think there has been some clarification here. I just want to make sure that this bullet point remains as it was intended, which is extracurricular, not, yes, of course, we're going to build, and we have been very supportive of our summer school and summer program and credit recovery and all of those things. And that's not saying extracurricular is a priority over that, but it's highlighting the fact that this board wants us to pay a little more attention to extracurricular and some focus there. So for that reason, I am happy with the language as it stands.
Ms. Shawhan.
All right, to not get into an overly dramatic and lengthy conversation about wordsmithing, so long as Dr. Bedell understands that this includes summer programming as well, I'll just go ahead and withdraw the motion so we can just move on with the night. Thank you.
Okay. So, Ms. Frank, I think we're ready for your motion.
I have the motion.
Oh, we do have a
We do have the
motion.
motion, the second, so I appreciate that.
Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second, and I do not see any lights. Any discussion? No lights?
No.
I will just say thank you to Mr. Stansky as well.
Lord.
Ms. Howe?
Ms. Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Hamdawi?
Aye.
Ms. Frank?
Aye.
Dr. Tobin?
Aye.
Ms. Ellis?
Aye.
Ms. Corkadel?
Aye.
Ms. Schallheim?
Aye.
And Mr. Silkworth?
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Okay, so we move on to item 8.0, public comments on non-agenda items. We do not have any public comments this evening. And so I do have a few updates for everyone. Equity Committee will be meeting on Tuesday, September 24th, a 12 p.m. virtual meeting. Budget Committee, October 14th at 12 p.m. That's also virtual. Policy Committee, October the 1st, 3 p.m. virtual. And our next board meeting will be here in the boardroom, October 2nd, 2024. That's a 12 p.m. boardroom meeting. Do I hear a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
Consensus. Thank you, everyone, for being with us. Please stay safe.